What's that saying again? When life gives you lemons, make lemonade? The Brits took it personally. Small, surrounded by water, and never dealt with a winning hand, the Royal Navy was far from destined for greatness. But who needs luck? With sheer grit and resilience, they fought, adapted, and turned every disadvantage into strength. This is the resilient history of how the Royal Navy clawed their way into becoming the most formidable fleet in the world. Keep your eyes peeled. You're on a sail of a lifetime. Since time immemorial, traversing goods over sea has always been cheaper than land. And he who controls the sea controls those who depend on it. Take Britain, for instance. Why do you think they were the most powerful nation in the world during the 18th and 19th centuries? It's simple. They controlled the world's oceans. However, what makes their story even more unique is the fact that the nation was not predestined for greatness. They were slow to engage in transoceanic trade during the 15th century. And although figures like Drake and Hawkins were successful in the 16th century, England was still in the early stages of becoming a naval force. In the 17th century, Holland and France were both superior to England at different times. Yet by the 18th century, Britain had secured a naval supremacy that would remain uncontested until the World Wars. But to truly understand why the Royal Navy became the most powerful, we need to talk about the resilience that shaped its destiny. Being an island nation, their survival and prosperity were both inherently tied to the seas. Unlike France or Germany, Britain couldn't rely on vast land armies for defense or expansion. Mastering its waters was the ultimate answer to protecting itself from invasion and opening the door to trade and global conquest. This is where the story gets interesting. By the 19th century, Britain was thrust into an industrial revolution that provided the Royal Navy with cutting-edge technology and the industrial capacity to build bigger, faster, and stronger ships than anyone else. Remember the HMS Dreadnought? As the first true battleship, she set new standards for naval power and kept the Royal Navy ahead of its rivals. Primarily constructed with fine steel, her hull was designed to be as simple as possible while being able to withstand the shock of firing a broadside of 8 guns. She was armed with 10 12-inch guns mounted in 5 twin turrets, which were capable of firing 850-kilogram shells over distances of 12,000 yards. This gave it significant long-range firepower, and also the ability to sink distanced ships better than vessels that used mixed-caliber artillery. It was a battleship, of course. The ship also carried 24 12-pounder quick-firing guns for defense against smaller vessels, as well as 5 18-inch torpedo tubes below the waterline. But it's safe to say her defensive armament was different. She relied on a heavily armored hull and superstructure, designed to withstand impacts from large-caliber shells. The ship's internal layout also incorporated layers of protection, with critical areas like the magazines and engines shielded by reinforced bulkheads. But personally, I think the Dreadnought shines most in speed. She was the first capital ship powered by steam turbines, making her the fastest battleship in the world at the time, with a top speed of 21 knots. And guess what? Would you believe the construction of the Dreadnought took only a year? This amazing build time, coupled with its advanced technology, solidified Britain's claim as a global naval powerhouse. She was so good that her launch triggered a naval arms race, especially with the Imperial German Navy, as nations frenzied to compete in the lead-up to World War I. This ushered in the Dreadnought era, where fleets spawned askew ships and super dreadnoughts worldwide. But alas, she was far from perfect. Remember when I told you the Dreadnought mostly relied on its armor for defense? Despite its robustness and strength, the thin armor was proven to be vulnerable to torpedo attacks. Who would have thought? Additionally, the top of the 11-inch belt was only 2 feet above the waterline at normal load, and it was submerged by over 12 inches at deep load. This left only the 8-inch upper belt to protect the waterline. Finally, the Dreadnought was a victim of its own success. The rapid pace of naval development during the Dreadnought era ushered in newer super dreadnoughts with even larger guns and thicker armor that rendered the original obsolete. Take nothing away from it though, the battleship remained a formidable asset throughout its operational life. During its operational career, HMS Dreadnought saw limited action in World War I and also missed the Battle of Jutland in 1916 as she was being refitted. Yet she became the only battleship confirmed to have sunk a submarine, the German U-29. On the 18th of March in 1915, the U-29, commanded by Otto Weddigen, met its Waterloo when it surfaced near the British fleet. After spotting the German submarine, HMS Dreadnought and other ships moved to intercept it. However, in a bid to escape, U-29 performed a dive, leaving it in a vulnerable position as the Dreadnought, with its superior speed, rammed into the midsection, splitting it in two. U-29 sank immediately, with all 31 crew members, including Weddington, lost. However, 4 years after the heroic sinking of U-29, Britain's Naval battleship was decommissioned and eventually scrapped in 1921. Despite having an anticlimactic ending to a relatively short career, the storied name of Dreadnought continued, with the first-in-class HMS Dreadnought leading to a new fleet of nuclear-powered ballistic missile boats built for the Royal Navy. And this brings us to Mrs. War Hero herself, the HMS Warspite. Built as part of the Queen Elizabeth class, the ship was designed to be quick, robust, and deadly enough to operate against the leading ships of the opposing line. This demanded maximum offensive power and a speed several knots faster than other battleships. But hey, with a length of about 643 feet and a beam of 90 feet, and a displacement of over 33,000 tons, you'd be hard-pressed to say she's not a charmer. Apart from her gigantic build and lush design, what truly made Warspite stand out was her incredible armor. She was equipped with 8 15-inch guns and twin turrets, a significant upgrade from previous dreadnoughts, and it allowed her to engage ships at even greater distances. Remember the Battle of Calabria in 1940? Of course you do. We still sing songs about how she scored one of the longest-range gunnery hits from a moving ship to a moving target in history. She fired a 15-inch projectile that struck the Italian battleship Giulio Cesare from a distance of almost 15 miles. And no, it wasn't just a scratch. The hit significantly damaged the Italian ship and forced its withdrawal from the battle. Besides its success at Calabria, Warspite played a big role in the Battle of Cape Matapan in 1941. She sank 2 Italian cruisers and several destroyers, delivering a devastating blow to the Italian Navy. Need her to sink a surface ship? Or defend against air attacks? You name it, Warspite could do it all. She even participated in the D-Day landings, bombarding German positions to support the Allied invasion of Normandy in 1944. In addition to its main guns, Warspite was also equipped with secondary 6-inch guns, anti-aircraft defenses, and torpedo tubes, all of which made the vessel versatile in a wide range of battle scenarios. Plus, she was also relatively quick. With a top speed of 24 knots, Warspite could also maneuver effectively in combat, despite being slower than the contemporary vessels that were launched as naval warfare evolved. Oh, remember when we said Dreadnought narrowly missed the Battle of Jutland? Well, Warspite didn't, and thankfully so because she received honors for her service. On the 31st of May 1916, Warspite joined the squadron for the Battle of Jutland, the largest naval battle between Britain and Germany in World War I. But due to a signaling mistake, the battleships fell behind Beatty's fast ships during the battlecruiser engagement, leaving the 5th Battle Squadron vulnerable to intense fire from the German High Seas Fleet as they retreated north. Despite being hit multiple times, Warspite's heavy armor protected the ship from catastrophic damage and was still able to land a good hit on the German battlecruiser von der Tann. Withdrawn from the battle, Warspite limped back to port for repairs, and she went on to serve the Royal Navy for decades, continuing to build on its legacy. However, it wasn't without its flaws. The ship's aging design meant it required frequent repairs, and its speed eventually became a disadvantage as naval technology advanced. But again, take nothing from her. With 15 to her name, Warspite has the most battle honors of any Royal Navy ship ever. It's sad that she eventually got decommissioned, and attempts to preserve it as a museum ship fell through. She deserves to be celebrated for decades to come. Moving on, let's talk about the HMS Belfast. It's no Warspite, but trust me, this beauty has a lot of interesting details to unpack. Launched in 1938, she didn't take part in both World Wars like the Warspite, but she saw extensive service during both World War II and the Korean War. As a town-class light cruiser, Belfast was built as an improved version of the Southampton subclass. She had a displacement of 11,550 tons and was powered by Parsons-geared steam turbines, allowing her to reach speeds of up to 32 knots, greater than both the iconic ships we've talked about so far. But apart from her speed, one of the things that really set her design apart was her armor protection. With a quick glance, you can tell the designers clearly wanted Belfast to be a well-rounded vessel. She was fitted with a 4.5-inch belt and a 2-inch deck, Not the thickest armor, sure, but enough to provide solid defense against enemy shells, especially considering that she was intended for fleet screening and convoy protection. Plus, Belfast was a light cruiser. She wasn't really expected to slug it out against robust battleships. Rather, her edge, her real edge, was her versatility. Her primary armament were 12 6-inch guns and 4 triple turrets, capable of unleashing serious barrage, and her secondary armament wasn't shabby either. She had 12 4-inch anti-aircraft guns, and later modifications even gave her the power to deal with aircraft, thanks to improved radar and anti-aircraft defenses. So you see, it's no surprise why she was a key player in the Arctic convoys and the Battle of the North Cape during World War II. Matter of fact, did you know she was a key player in the sinking of the German battleship Scharnhorst? Yeah, it was a team effort with other British ships, but the real game changer was her radar system that allowed her to track and hit targets even in bad weather or low visibility. Loved, but not perfect, Belfast had its fair share of flaws. Her armor, despite being somewhat okay for a cruiser, wasn't as thick as a battleship's. This limited her operational activities as she had to rely on speed and tactical positioning to avoid taking heavy hits that likely would have been fatal. Additionally, her range was a bit limited by her fuel capacity, further reducing her capability for long-range operations like the heavier ships. Still, what a career she had. She played key roles in World War II and was also stellar during the Korean War, where she provided naval gunfire support. And the best part? She had a better ending than the Dreadnought and the Warspite. In 1967, plans to scrap HMS Belfast led to efforts to preserve her as a museum, and despite her preservation being deemed feasible by a joint committee of the Imperial War Museum, the government rejected it in 1971. Thankfully though, the private HMS Belfast Trust formed, successfully securing the ship's transfer in July 1971. Open to the public since then, Belfast became a branch of the Imperial War Museum in the late 1970s. Since 1973, HMS Belfast has served as the home for the City of London Sea Cadets, who meet on board twice a week. And as a popular tourist destination, the ship welcomed over 327,000 visitors in 2019. It's the least she deserves though. Along with the iconic boats like the Dreadnought and the Warspite, Belfast's battle achievements, history, and technologies have made the British Royal Navy the fleet it is today. But back to the million-dollar question. Was technology really the reason why the British were so successful on the sea? After all, they did invent the single biggest invention in sea navigation in thousands of years. Before its invention, sailors relied on rudimentary methods to determine their longitude, and this often led to miscalculations, causing ships to veer dangerously off course. Many vessels were wrecked or lost, and countless sailors suffered because of the inaccuracies. When John Harris solved it by inventing the chronometer, British ships were able to navigate seas with pinpoint accuracy, and this made them dominate at sea, as no other navy could match this precision until they were able to replicate the chronometer. But while it's easy to point fingers at technology for making the Royal Navy great, the truth is that it wasn't cutting-edge tech alone. The British were master tacticians at sea, and the Royal Navy's command structure fostered bold, decisive leadership, the most famous example being Admiral Horatio Nelson, whose victory at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805 not only crushed Napoleon's naval ambitions, but secured Britain's naval dominance for the next century. Till date, Nelson's tactics at Trafalgar, breaking the enemy line and engaging in close combat, are still studied in naval academies, and don't even get me started on how the English place emphasis on constant onboard training. As an island nation, they spend more time than most on the seas and train sailors on difficult terrains. Finally, they've also been lucky without knowing it. For centuries, they've implemented anti-scorabutics and gulped fruits necessary to keep men healthy on sea. Despite the hardships of naval life, British sailors often had more regular meals and better health than they did on land. In fact, Captain Cook famously made his crew eat sauerkraut to prevent scurvy, leading to the first long-distance voyage without losing a man to disease. This success convinced the British to provide citrus fruits to their sailors, earning them the nickname limeys. If it wasn't for the rise of air power and submarines, the Royal Navy may have continued its absolute dominance for another century. German U-boats threatened to cut off Britain's supply lines to the US, and the latter, through years of dedication and hefty budget, eventually surpassed Britain by the war's end. And that, guys, is why if you want to learn more about naval history and the fleet that wrote it, then you're in the right place to be. So, Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when a new video drops. And while you're at it, don't just stop here. Grab a quick snack and check out the channel for more amazing videos. See you in the next one.